Alright, I wanted to avoid all the crowds and the masses out there on the holiday weekend. So while I'm here on my non-camping weekend off, I decided I'd do a quick update on what I'd like to do for the cassette toilet maintenance. I've kind of changed it up as far as how I keep this thing clean in between trips. And it may be a lot less gross and a lot easier to deal with. So before we get to the outside in that cassette, I'm going to go over a quick update on what I've done to this toilet so far to make things a little better, for those that don't know yet. So what I've added here is a little push button, which I had to change out, by the way, and that turns on a set of little computer fans I made that go in the vent pipe for the cassette tank itself to kind of pull some smell out of that thing. Because anybody knows, if you're running this fan up here and these trailers are sealed well enough, it will create a kind of a negative pressure in here and suck everything up out of that cassette. Those little fans keep that at bay while this fan is venting outwards. It works pretty good. I'm still getting a little smell into the trailer on travel, even with a couple things that I have done, but it's not nearly as bad as it was before. And by the way, it's not that bad if you actually dump that cassette before you leave camp. Go to the dump station, clear it all out. Of course, it's not going to smell, but what I think is happening is air is rushing up the vent pipe, or the negative pressure in this trailer is being sucked through that vent. Now, with that running and this fan venting inwards while I'm traveling, it did seem to really mitigate that, but there still is a little bit of smell if you have stuff in the cassette tank. But like I said, not nearly as bad as it was stock. Alright, coming around to the outside here, on this model tab, or this style Thetford cassette toilet, you have a couple pockets back here, and I had to modify this to do this, but I cut the vent pipe and I hodgepodged some 2-inch rubber plumbing couplers that fit just perfectly, and I stacked 2 tiny computer fans in there, and I ran the wires up the back and right up through this hole here to that switch, and then I'm tapping in power right over here. So that does work fairly well. I'm still searching for a more powerful fan system, and I think that would 100% keep the smell out of this trailer on travel, but this is good enough for now, especially being at camp. Okay, now to get to what I wanted to talk about in the first place here, is the maintenance and cleaning of this tank. I've kind of changed up what I've been doing over the last 6 months or so. A couple out there have given me ideas, and I think I've almost perfected this as far as really needing to get in here and scrub things, and using brushes in and out of things, and getting some really nasty stuff anywhere. So I'm going to go over that and what I like to do for maintenance when it comes to these seals, especially the main toilet seal that has been working here for the last over a year and a half. Especially out here in the desert, anything that is rubber or anything like that tends to really dry up, so the fact that it's doing really well out here means I'm doing something right. I do have the Tabs air conditioner running, so hopefully you can hear me there, especially with the military aircraft flying around here today. But I'm going to put on some gloves here anyway, because people get worried about my hands and health, although I know this thing is probably spotless. But you're going to do this with me. I'm going to crack this thing open and explain what I've been doing to take care of this, and we're going to find out if it's been working. So the easiest way, once again, to get this mechanism off is you slide your cover back to about halfway, and you need to take a good firm grip, maybe even lean on the side of your cassette, and carefully twist this. And that's why it's important to keep these seals lubed, so you can easily turn this. Some like to use a little 2x4 in here to get a little more leverage, pull this thing out, but that works fine if these seals are lubed correctly. Alright, we're going to find out how bad this is. You may have to turn away and vomit. Let's see. Carefully lift it out, don't hit your float on anything. And would you look at that? That looks pretty darn good. even in between all these little crevices and cracks in here and parts, it has stayed fairly clean. I mean, you have a slight amount of residue in here, which isn't too bad, but that is impressive. And by the way, the little cap on the end of the float fell off once again, and if anybody at Thetford is watching this, you guys need to glue those in or completely seal this float up. Now I have no indication whether or not this thing is full with a little dum-dum light on the side of the toilet. But I don't really care anymore. It's not a big deal. You can literally look down in this thing through the toilet and see how full it is. So let's set this aside and see if we could take a look inside here. That's going to be a little hard for you all to tell, but I mean, usually stuff builds up in that back end. I don't see a whole bunch on that white part back in there, but not too bad at all. And that has been 3 months of use for about 7 3-day trips. So everything's looking pretty darn good inside there. No nasty blood and guts or scum and poo. Okay, now I want to discuss how I'm keeping this clean. Once I dump this, when I go to a dump station anyway, I rinse this thing out thoroughly at least 3 times. And on the return trip home, I'll throw a little bit of tank treatment in there and about that much water in the bottom of this to let it kind of move around in there. Then when I've been getting home, I'll put 1 more dose of tank treatment in there and I'll fill this thing up with water almost to the top. And by almost is when you can look in there and see the water just starting to get to the bottom of this. And then I'll let that sit for a couple days, and then I'll take this over to the clean out and I'll go dump the water out. So that is a lot easier, lazier, and quicker way of keeping this clean. But what you always want to do is you do want to pull this apart, and you really do want to look in all this junk in here, because there are a lot of little moving parts, and sometimes you will have to get in here with a paper towel and wipe some things off, because you want this blade mechanism working nice and smooth, because you can see it's pretty mechanically involved there, and that's a lot of junk to get toilet paper caught up on, or some nasties. And you definitely want this working nice and smooth, or else when you go pull your toilet flusher there, you may run a risk of breaking these flusher parts in here. They're just plastic, you know, and out here in the desert they can get brittle. So you want that valve mechanism or flapper mechanism on that tank working nice and smooth. If you break this, you won't be able to flush. Alright, now we're going to get into a couple of things I like to use to maintain these seals and keep things working just right. And the first thing I'm going to show you is over here in your spout. If you don't know this already, you turn this and clock that at just the right angle, and you can pull that up. That is grooved in a specific way to lock in. So if you're pouring, you don't want to go past 90 degrees there, but when you go a little past that, it will lock in and push out. And you can see how easy this was to turn. And that's because about every 3 months of use, in my case, because I'm using this trailer all the time, I will come in here. I use a little bit of this food grade multi-purpose silicone grease, or plumber's grease as they call it, and I will put a little dab of that right here on the O-ring. And just work that onto the O-ring. That's going to keep that O-ring nice, smooth turning, lubricated, and sealed. Take this thing and pop it back in, and just give her a few turns and let that grease work its way in there, and you should be good to go. The other thing you can use is a silicone lubricant like this. anything that is rubber safe, you don't want to use WD-40. And for everybody out there, stop using WD-40 as a lubricant. It's a solvent. You can use it to clean stuff with, as far as maybe stickery stuff that's stuck on from decals and whatnot, and cleaning up parts, but do not use it on rubber. It'll make rubber kind of gooey and melty like over time. So find a food grade plumber's silicone grease, or you can use some of this silicone spray if you don't want to touch anything. I'm not going to use this today, but it's fairly simple and straightforward. You just find your seals and you know, give them a little bit of a spray. But while I'm in here at it, I'm going to take a little bit of that silicone grease and I'm going to put that all over this main seal so I can make sure it keeps turning. And if it's easier, just take the whole O-ring, gasket, seal, whatever you want to call this thing off, and then run your grease around the inside and outside. Just make sure you get this seal on in the correct way. Be the larger groove side opening outwards. So make sure you slide that all back on and around all these grooves just like that. When you put your lid back down in here, there's a specific way to do that. There should be a little arrow on the edge of this port here. And you line that up with the double circle here. Make sure everything's pressed down. And you just turn it till it lines up with the open circle there. And make sure that this is going in the right direction, or you'll have some problems sliding this into your trailer. And that's easy enough as it is, because that has an arrow to line up with that arrow. Pretty simple stuff. Just make sure your flapper mechanism here lines up the correct way for the slot inside of that trailer. While we're at it, I'm going to dump in a little bit of this Thetford toilet seal conditioner. I found this really helps out to keep that flapper moving nice and easy, and you want to put just enough in to almost come to the top of that rubber gasket. And I'll take a little bit of that on my finger and rub the main seal with that. That way it stays conditioned and it slides in and out with no trouble at all. Put your little lid back on here, and I always keep a bottle of these sanitizing wipes in the trailer for this reason. When I'm done dumping this at the dump station, I like to take a couple of these and wipe this whole thing down to make sure any surface is fully sanitized. That way if I need to pull it out by hand and I don't have any gloves on me, there won't be a problem. Plus it's good to keep things nice and clean, especially the little pocket that this goes into. So clean the whole thing, top, bottom, and sides. Even clean your wheels, and especially the underneath of this thing. There you go. Now it's time to slide her back in. But before we slide that back in, I'm going to explain why I like to really clean that cassette tank. And I will also come in here with a sanitizing wipe and clean all this surface. You can see right in through here that any dirt and dust that gets stuck on the bottom of that or in between this pocket and the cassette tank will start gouging away at things, which isn't a big deal, but you definitely don't want this really wearing in and getting all nasty in there, especially if you have an accident and need to clean things up. And the same goes for up here at the base of your toilet. You want to make sure that this is clean. You don't have any grit in between your toilet seal on that cassette and this toilet seal. That way that rubber seal stays good for a long time. There we go, all nice and cleaned up and ready to go. Alright, back up on the inside and I'll show you how that seal conditioner works. It just comes right up to the edge of that black rubber seal. Now they say to let that sit for about 8 hours. If you have plenty of time to sit, just leave it in there until you're ready to use it, then you flush it. I'd like to do a full recap on that cassette toilet, but first here's one more tip if you live in the desert that I had forgotten about till a few friends told me they do it with their trailers, and I did have somebody else on here mention that they do it. Out here in the desert, we have the opposite problem of everybody else, and everything inside our trailers heats up and dries out. So many people I know will take a gallon bucket and leave it in the shower while their trailer sits for a long period of time because it's so dry out here and hot. But since I'm using this every couple weeks, I figured I don't need that much water. But just to show you, it's been almost a week and a half now, and this water has gone down from the top edge up here down to that. That's a lot of evaporation. Now only a lot of time will be able to tell whether or not that actually works. But like I may have noted before, when it comes to any of this wood, you can see a little bit of dry cracking right there. Not a lot, that's what wood does, but I want to try to prevent that, especially out here in the desert. When it comes to plastics and all kinds of stuff, typically they don't last more than a few years, so we don't want this stuff getting brittle and turning into dust. But if you live in the humid regions of the country, or the places that don't exceed 110, 120 degrees very often, you're going to have to get a damp rid and do the opposite to get rid of moisture and humidity. Right now we are cooling down to 95 inside, and it is 110 with 6% humidity out there. Air temp wise, it's probably more like 102, 103, but that was getting some sun earlier. But it's getting hot. Alright, so quick recap on this cassette tank. Now this is how I do things. You don't have to do it that way. I know somebody's going to yell at me and tell me, oh, you should never do that. But you know what? I've pretty much been doing all this since I got this trailer a year and a half ago, and things are working out really good. Like I said, 6 months ago, I changed up how I maintain that cassette as far as cleaning goes. In the beginning there, every 2 months, I was taking everything apart. I was going in there with a toilet brush and an old dirty microfiber towel and cleaning off the scale and poo and nasty stuff. And now I don't really have to worry about that. So a lot easier, a lot cleaner. Now, like I said, here's the important part. When you're traveling, you know, you leave a little bit of that toilet treatment in there in water. You don't want to fill that up and have that sloshing all around. There is a little vent valve in that cassette tank that comes up and down out the air vent below the trailer. And if that's open, you never know, that could slosh around and get some nasties out of that and down into that pocket where the cassette goes. And the other good thing about immediately recharging your cassette toilet tank with tank treatment is that it helps build up the bacteria and enzymes inside that tank again to start breaking down your waste. When I dump this tank, I pour the gray water right into that cassette toilet. That way I drain my gray water without getting a big old slinky hose out. Plus, it's nice soapy water still, and that helps clean that tank up. And that's why after that you want to throw in tank treatment again and recharge it. That way the good bacteria and enzymes in there can build back up to break your waste down. Now as I do these videos, I tend to forget some things because I just free flow and talk as I go here. So I may have left out the part, once you get home, you need to pull that cassette out if you're going to fill it full of water, because if your float actually works, the little indicator light will come on, and I think it stays on, and you don't want that staying on. Also, when you fill that up, that is going to be close to 50 pounds of weight. So that may be pretty difficult for some out there to lift and manhandle and carry over to a clean out or toilet in your house, however you dump your cassette tank. So that's one thing to think about. But definitely pull it out, set it outside somewhere safe or in your garage. Like I said, you're going to be about that far from the top. That way that whole tank soaks and those enzymes and bacteria eat up any of the nasty stuff that's trying to hang on in there. I typically give that 3 days to soak. You could let it go a little longer, but I don't think there's any point to that. It seems like it's working out just perfectly. Well, hopefully that information was useful to some of you out there that may be new to this cassette toilet, or may have had a cassette toilet and may not have thought of that yet. So in about a week and a half here or so, I'll be out camping again. And you're not going to want to miss this one, because this spot definitely is pretty awesome. And it's going to be one heck of a haul to get there. But before I close this video out, and since it is the day after Memorial Day, I would like to sincerely thank all the men and women of our armed forces for protecting this great country, especially those who never return. Thank you. See you all in about a week and a half.